All right, so I've got my file, and the easiest way to turn this into a grayscale, but the most heavy-handed, and the one that would give us the least amount of options, and it would be destructively editing, would be go to image mode grayscale. So we're not going to do that because this is going to discard all of the image information. This actually gives us a hint. When I do this, it says to control the conversion, why don't you use image adjustments black and white? So this is now giving us tips and telling us, instead of doing it this way, why don't you give yourself some options and be able to do this non-destructively. So I'm not going to discard my color information. I'm actually going to do what Photoshop told me to do. So this is my adjustments panel, and you'll see that we've got brightness and contrast, levels, curves, exposure, vibrance, color mixer, black and white, hue and saturation. So we've got a bunch of different adjustments. I'm going to use the black and white adjustment layer, and automatically you'll see that it turns it into a black and white, but in my properties panel it gives me red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. I'll be able to use these sliders to adjust where the gray is mapped within each of these color channels. So if I move the red, you can see the little bit of the rock and some of the reflection in the sand is changed, so I can either make that darker or lighter. The yellow, same thing, some of the reflection as well as some of the rock in the cliff. Same thing with the green, just a little bit is being changed there. Now the cyan has a large effect within the sky, making the sky either darker or brighter. And the same thing with the blue. So I can make that very, very bright or somewhere in between. Magenta doesn't seem to have any effect at all. We also have presets. So you've got presets, for instance, blue filter. So these relate to typical filters that you might have as a photographer in the days of film. So you've got these different presets that you could just try out. And you, of course, can make changes depending on what you like or don't like. So high contrast red filter is going to make the sky very, very dark. Essentially what these old filters did was they would filter out different wavelengths of light, rendering your image different in your film. Of course, now we've got Photoshop to use these different filters. So this is what I'm going to have you guys begin to play with. Like I said, you can go through the presets and see if there's one that that stands out to you that you really like, and even if it's something that you're like, oh, I kind of like that, but I still want to tweak it, you can still tweak that image. So that's the black and white adjustment layer. You should see in your layers panel the adjustment layer as well as your background. Now, there was something that I forgot to do that I told you guys you always want to do when you open your image in Photoshop. First things first. What do I want to do?
Copy.
Yep, I'm going to copy that background layer just as a backup. And you can even see in my background copy, do you see how my layer thumbnail is actually in color? So it's not showing it as black and white, so I know that color information is still there. The reason that we work in layers is because it is working non-destructively. No matter what I change in that adjustment layer, I can go back by clicking into that layer and make adjustments and change it. Whereas if I had just gone to image mode grayscale, I'm just discarding all that information. Now, you may have found another way to access that black and white filter. So if you go to image adjustments, you go to image adjustments, now you can see all of those same adjustments that I had in my adjustments panel, but they're listed under the image adjustments dialog. Well, if I do this, if I go to image adjustments and find my adjustments from here, this panel looks very similar to the properties panel in my adjustments layers, but the problem with these is it's going to apply it to the entire image. I won't have the ability to go back and change it. So say I've decided that I'm going to use this route where I go to Image, Adjustments, Black and White. And I say, okay, now instead of being able to go back and change that, I'm stuck. So I would just have to throw that layer away because it applies it to the background. It applies it to that layer. So instead, make sure that you're using your layer adjustments. Now, if you don't see this panel right here, this adjustment panel, you can go to your layers panel, which you should always have open, and this little symbol, which I call the black and white cookie, basically just, I remember.
It does remind you of cookie.
I know.
That's so nice that
in New York, it was my favorite treat, the little black and white cookie. So that's, for me, what it reminds me of. It's a black and white cookie. So it's just the circle that's half black and half white. And if you click and hold, then you're gonna see all of your different adjustments. And you can go to black and white. And again, this is happening on a layer, on a separate layer. So I'm not affecting anything in my image. This is the only way to work non-destructively, is to work in your layers panel. Now, if you like seeing this little adjustment, like the icons with the adjustment layers, you can always go to View, or I'm sorry, Window, and then choose any of these different palettes that you want to be able to see. And like I said, I always have my adjustments, my history, my layers, and my properties open at the very minimum. So what's another way that I could potentially look at my image as a black and white? Besides the black and white adjustment layer, you could go to Hue and Saturation and just desaturate your image. Problem is, again, I still don't have control over the image like I did with the black and white adjustment layer. So I can't change where the blue or the cyan is mapped to. So the best and most versatile option is definitely going to be that aptly named black and white adjustment layer. Yeah. Now, are there other ways to do it? Sure. There are other ways to do it. But again, I would suggest just using the black and white adjustment layer. So that's going to be the easiest one for you guys to deal with when it comes to your landscape. Play around with it, and as you make these adjustments, also consider zooming in so you can see what's happening, because what I've found is that sometimes whenever you're looking at it from far away, things can look fine, but you'll start to get these kind of weird artifacts in certain areas if you're making a really drastic adjustment. So just to, kind of take a look and see if it's creating some kind of weird artifacts as you go. All right. And also watch out for like haloing around the edges. So you can see how this is creating this kind of weird edge to it. But if I reduce that, then it goes away. So something to consider. Another option before you open your images in Photoshop is, and I briefly went over it when I gave you a run through of Lightroom. I'll just use this image as maybe an example. I was going to see if I had any, what I would call fringing around the edges. A lot of times you'll find this if you've got an image where it's a really brightly lit scene, and you'll have chromatic aberrations occur in the image. And you can fix this by going into Develop, Lens Correction, and then Remove Chromatic Aberration. I thought that I would see more of that in that image, but I'm not seeing it. Okay, this might be a decent one to use. Do you see how right in here it's kind of a red-yellow color right along the edge of the tin roof, and at the top of the tin roof it looks like it's cyan?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I use the remove chromatic aberration, it's hard to see. You might have to get, you know, close on that screen, but do you see how that cyan fringe up here and this fringe goes away? So now it's on, now it's off. So this may be something that you want to play around with whenever you're looking at your landscape, because this can prevent some of that weird halo effect when you work on your images in the black and white adjustment layer. So that's something that's handy to do. If you're seeing that in your image, then this will automatically remove it. So it's just it's fixing just problem areas in a lens, and it often happens whenever you have a very brightly lit scene, and you'll get this chromatic aberration. So that's pretty much it. You guys